Missouri lawmakers are up against the clock with the end of the session coming Friday, and there are still several major items to consider, including a push to limit the power of the petition. Last week, voting rights groups rallied against a Republican-led push we discussed here on the broadcast. It makes it harder for people who gather petitions to pass a ballot measure. You'd need at least 60% support at the polls, not just a simple majority. At least that's one version. We'll get to that in a second. Critics we spoke with earlier in the session say this is an issue that transcends party.
This is something that's not partisan. It's not Democrat. It's not Republican. Conservatives, liberals, and everyone in between benefits from being able to participate in the citizen initiative process.
You know, Missouri voters have passed a number of more progressive issues through the petition process, most recently legalizing recreational marijuana. But again, it's one of many issues on the table. Let's dive in with our roundtable of journalists. Please welcome back Brian Ellison, host contributor with KCUR, and KMBC9 political reporter Michael Mahoney. Okay, let's start with this petition issue. Obviously, what happens here carries a lot of weight, and there's some back and forth right now between lawmakers and the House and Senate over what this threshold should be.
Right. Some want it as high as 60%. Or 57%. The plan right now, as it stands, as we go into the final week of the session, is at 54%. But they've also picked up a huge opponent in the Missouri Association of Realtors, who are vowing to oppose this. And if this gets on the ballot, then voters still have to approve it by the old standard of 50 plus 1%. So we'll see. This is a very, very controversial element, especially among folks that have seen and used the petition process, as we talked about with recreational marijuana, Medicare, those sorts of things.
Well, and recreational marijuana, if any of these measures pass the way they do, things like that, progressive measures like that, would not pass.
Right, even though they clearly enjoy strong support from the Missouri population. Medicaid expansion, as you mentioned, Mike. The reality is that this is not about the past votes, this is about the future votes. Right. This is about the possibility of potential abortion rights legislation being accomplished through citizen initiative. This is about future issues that the Republican supermajority in the House and Senate can prevent legislatively, but would not be able to prevent if it goes to a vote of the people.
And one of the things about this is Republicans in the legislature have convinced themselves that there is going to be a move by the pro-abortion movement to place an abortion component in the Constitution sometime before the 24 election cycle, and that's driving this whole idea of raising the threshold for getting an amendment passed.
For sure, something we'll be watching. We're also been looking at transgender rights, still very much at the forefront of the conversation. You have the AG's ruling, temporarily blocked by the courts when it comes to gender-affirming health care, and essentially a mandate from Governor Parson, Brian, when it comes to that and the sports issue. So what should we expect here?
Well, I think we should probably not expect much to change here in the last week of this session. The governor has said he will call a special session to address this issue. A lot of folks have portrayed that as a threat from the governor. I think in some ways the governor is taking some pressure off the Republican leadership in the House and the Senate so that they can go ahead and, especially the Senate, pass other legislation. But I do think we've already seen significant willingness to limit the rights of transgender athletes to participate in the sport of their gender, significant willingness to limit gender-affirming care, particularly as it applies to minors. The trends, certainly we've seen it on the Kansas side and in many other states around the country, this seems to be an issue that Republicans around the country are willing to go all in on. So I think whether it happens this week or in the future, we should expect more in Missouri.
This push on transgender rights and restrictions, I think, will be one of the forefront issues. And of course, Andrew Bailey, the Attorney General, has got his proposal that includes restrictions on adults, the transgender adults, and that's before the court.
Yeah, so I think that will face real problems in the court, I think. And I also think Democrats are going to threaten to filibuster and shut down all legislation in the Senate if they try to pass this in the last week of the session.
And one other thing I think we ought to watch here is in this final week whether or not the idea of sports betting gets off the floor. I don't think it will. However, to kind of tie up this whole discussion with the initiative petition, the St. Louis Cardinals organization is now looking at trying to develop some sort of petition initiative to put sports betting on the ballot in 2024. So we'll see how that goes.
Right, and you know these lawmakers are seeing what's going on from these big events, the draft, the Super Bowl. people making money over in Kansas and all of the other states surrounding us right now.
Exactly. Iowa, Illinois. I think that's what will eventually carry the day is in getting sports wagering in Missouri. They're going to see the money, and that's what always works.
And the money in Missouri, because the state is twice as big as Kansas, will be substantially more than it is in Kansas.
Right, and they just keep hitting those roadblocks, and we'll see if they are able to move those out of the road. Brian Ellison, Michael Mahoney, thank you so much. Stay with KMBC 9 News every step of the way as we watch the final days of Missouri's session. Look for updates on air and online at KMBC.com.